This is a scene most of you will recognize, the most famous cricket ground in the world. And this is one of the modern heroes you'll see there, England's young and very successful captain. Here we see the Lord's Taverners of 1899 and their ladies. And this was the target of their admiration. From W.G. Grace to Peter May, Boer War to Cold War, penny farthing to Sputnik. 6 decades of history of which we shall show just a few highlights. The highlights of yesterday, of the rich period between the wars. Dr. Grace, and also from that golden age, Ranji. Now, after the First World War, the great figure was Jacks Hobbs, in the 20s at the height of his fame. An occasional glimpse of Ranji, 47 and rather plump, was a nostalgic reminder of more leisured days. But in this hurried new world, even he didn't stay so long. However, Jacks Hobbs wasn't a bad model from which to build a new generation of batsmen. And this sort of thing was rare enough in those days to make this almost a historic picture. There were other great men reaching the peak of their career in 1921. Frank Woolley was one of them. And there was a colourful character destined to bring many happy hours to the citizens of Kennington and elsewhere, Percy George Fender, an all-rounder Surrey would be proud to have even now in these days of plenty. Warwick Armstrong. In 1921, he brought one of the best of all Australian sides to England. It contained many famous names: Herbie Collins, the vice-captain, Horseshoe Collins, Arthur Maley, one of the best of Australian spin bowlers. A cartoonist now, a writer, and a character, Jack Gregory, a great fast bowler. Indeed, a great all-rounder. Playing for England that year, English cricket, having barely recovered from the war and with injuries abounding, was not a very rewarding honour. Here at Leeds, Lionel Tennyson lost the toss. He lost Hobbs later the same day with appendicitis, and in spite of his own 63 in an hour with a split hand, lost the match. Here come the Australians, Bardsley and Andrews, on their way to begin the slaughter. Well, slaughter it may have been. This was England's 3rd successive defeat in the series. But in time, English cricket began to rise again, just as it was to do after another war, a quarter of a century later. And when Herbie Taylor brought his South African team to England in 1924, here they are being presented by their captain to King George V, they found a formidable new partnership established, a partnership which was to make 268 for the first wicket in this Lord's Test, and to make all sorts of history in the next few years. Hobbs and Sutcliffe. Next winter, they went together to Australia. And for the first time for 12 years, Australia lost a test match. Next time, in 1926, it might be the Ashes. Meanwhile, an enthusiastic welcome home, and then 12 months of speculation and excitement, such as few test series can have provoked, either before or since. At Lord's next winter, a new grandstand was built to meet the enormous public demand for seats. And when the Board of Control met to appoint test selectors, this dignified, but one would have thought pictorially unexciting body, was accorded the limelight of a conference of politicians. Lord Harris, bottom right, was the great legislator and administrator. For the first time, the board invited 2 professionals to serve on the selection committee, Hobbs and Rhodes. There was to be no disappointment. Later that year, the Ashes came back to England at the Oval, and for a few years, English cricket enjoyed a halcyon era. After Percy Chapman's side had retained the Ashes in 1928-29, another Australian team came to England in 1930, the first of the 2 captained by Woodfull. At Lord's, Chapman and Woodfull come out to toss. As you will see, it's a toss which satisfied most of those in the pavilion. A few minutes later, Woodfull leads Australia out at the start of one of the best and most famous test matches ever played. A match of brilliant batting on both sides, a match in which England were beaten by 7 wickets by about tea time on the 4th day, though they scored around 400 in each innings. Sutcliffe having recently split a thumb, Hobbs and Woolley opened for England. They were then, respectively, aged 47 and 43. This was the only match in which these 2 great batsmen ever opened for England together. On that first day, England scored 405 for 9, of which Jacks, Uncle Ranji watching, made a wonderful 173. Here he is, reaching a century which lives clearly in the memory of many of us to this day. Woolley played one of the classic short innings of Test cricket, 41 in the first 40 minutes of the match. A piece of cricket full of strokes like this one. And this, using his immense reach to hit Grimmett to the square leg boundary. But the greatest innings of that great match was the 254 of a young Australian not yet 22, Don Bradman. And at Leeds a fortnight later, he played another fabulous innings, this time 334. In the second over of the match, Archie Jackson was caught at short leg by Larwood off Tate. That was the last success the English bowlers had for a long time. Bradman had made 100 by lunch and 309 by the end of the day. Geary bowled to him. Larwood bowled to him. Richard Tildesley bowled to him. And Maurice Tate. But all came alike. The greatest of all batting prodigies had arrived. England's answer, in Australia 3 winters later, was a battery of fast bowlers and Bodyline. This is not the place to discuss the pros and cons of Bodyline. You'll see for yourselves that here at Adelaide, the Australian batsman didn't see many of the pros. Woodfull is hit. Woodfull loses his bat. Bradman ducks. Larwood bowls faster than ever. And here Bradman gives a comfortable catch to Allen at short leg. G.O. Allen, later captain of England and chairman of selectors. Wisden records that this third test match in January 1933 will go down in history as probably the most unpleasant ever played. England won it by 338 runs to lead 2-1 in the series. Subsequently, they won the last 2 tests as well. The Ashes lost in 1930 were regained, but at what a cost. They were lost again in 1934 and not regained in 1938, though at the Oval that year, Len Hutton made his historic 364. He reaches 200. Fingleton hobbles off with a strained muscle. O'Reilly bowls, and Hutton passes another landmark on the way to Bradman's record, 334. 300. From all over London, people are trying to squeeze into the Oval to see the climax of this prodigious innings, now in its 3rd day. Hutton, very weary now, goes on and on and on this most perfect of wickets, until at last he passes Bradman's score of 8 years before. And Bradman leads the congratulations. They pause for drinks inside. No such good fortune outside. Bradman bowls and twists an ankle. Neither he nor Fingleton can bat in the match, and Australia lose by an innings and 579 runs, to the largest total ever made in a test match. The 132 England needed in the last innings took a lot of getting, but Edrich played one of his staunchest innings, and eventually Compton hit the 4, which won the match, the rubber, and after a gap of 19 years, the Ashes.